The colony market smelled of dust, smoke, and spoiled fruit. Broken stalls stood under the gray sky, guarded by alien enforcers with sharp armor and colder eyes. The ground was cracked, the air filled with hunger and silence. People moved slowly, heads down, each one afraid of drawing attention. In the middle of it all, a woman staggered forward. Her skin was pale, her clothes torn, and her steps weak. In her arms lay a child, thin as a shadow, lips dry, breathing slow. She clutched him tightly, whispering something no one else could hear. Her knees hit the stone with a dull sound. She could not stand anymore. She looked up at the nearest human soldier. He stood near a stall filled with leftover bread and half-rotten vegetables. His uniform was neat, his boots clean, and his eyes tired. He had seen war, but he had never seen such begging. The woman pressed her forehead to the ground. Her voice cracked like dry wood. "Please, may I have the leftovers? For my child?" Her words were soft, but the silence of the market carried them far. The alien guards laughed. Their voices were cruel, echoing through the broken stalls. One shouted, "Pathetic creature, begging scraps from another slave." The woman did not answer. She only lifted her head enough to show her eyes, wide and shining with tears. She did not beg for herself. Her lips trembled as she looked down at the boy in her arms. His eyes opened slightly, dull with exhaustion. He whispered, barely a breath, "Mama? Food?" The soldier's heart tightened. He had been ordered not to share supplies. Every soldier knew the law. Rations were for their unit, not for outsiders. Any kindness would be punished. He stood still, his hand resting on the pack strapped to his belt. He felt the weight of the food inside. He could almost hear the boy's voice in his mind, weak and fading. He wanted to move, but his commander's warning echoed louder. Disobedience meant chains. The woman pressed forward on her knees, dragging herself across the dust until she was close enough to touch the edge of his boot. She held the child up slightly, as if showing proof of her desperation. 3 days? Nothing, she whispered. He cannot wait another night. Her voice shook, but it carried a strength that came only from a mother's will to keep her child alive. The soldier swallowed hard. His throat was dry. Around him, the market had stopped moving. Every eye was on him. Some waited for him to obey orders, to turn away. Others waited for him to show mercy, to do what no one else dared. The air was thick, pressing against his chest. He could feel sweat on his forehead, even though the wind was cold. The child's small hand reached out. His fingers were thin, trembling in the air, reaching for the soldier as if the man was the last light left in the world. The soldier bent down slowly, almost without thinking. His hand hovered near his pack. Then a sharp voice cut through the silence. "Soldier!" An alien officer stepped forward, eyes glowing with anger. His armor clinked as he marched closer. "Step away from that filth. Leave her to starve. That is the law." The soldier froze, his hand still hovering near the food. He looked at the officer, then at the woman, then at the boy. The child's eyes closed halfway, his lips whispering one more word. "Papa?" It was not meant for the human, but hearing it broke something inside him. His chest burned. He knew he could turn away and keep his life simple. He knew obeying orders meant safety. But the boy's voice would not leave his ears. The officer sneered. "Do not shame your uniform, human. Stand up and walk away." The guards laughed again, waiting to see him obey. The woman held her child tighter, her body shaking. She no longer begged. She simply bowed her head, as if ready to accept death, but still shielded the boy with her arms. The soldier's fingers clenched. He pulled the strap of his pack loose. The sound was small, but in the silent market it was like thunder. Every head turned sharply, every guard stiffened. He reached inside, pulled out his ration bar, and knelt down. The officer shouted, "Stop!" but the soldier ignored him. He placed the food in the woman's trembling hands. Her eyes widened. For a moment, she did not move. She looked at the bar as if it were treasure, then at him as if he were something beyond human. She broke the bar quickly and pressed the first piece to her child's lips. The boy chewed weakly, but as soon as the taste hit his tongue, his body shook with life. He ate like a starving animal, every bite desperate. Tears rolled down the woman's cheeks. She whispered again and again, "Thank you, thank you." The officer's boots slammed against the stone as he stepped closer, rage burning in his eyes. Guards raised their weapons, but the soldier stood in front of the mother now. He did not move back. His voice was steady, low, but clear enough for everyone to hear. If compassion is a crime, he said, then I accept the punishment. The market held its breath. The woman clutched her child to her chest, food crumbs still on his lips. The human stood between her and the soldiers, a wall of flesh against steel. The officer's face twisted with fury, but also with something else: fear. For in that moment, every pair of eyes in the market saw a soldier break the law for mercy, and no one could laugh anymore. The child's lips moved slowly, cracked and pale, but his whisper reached the soldier's ears. Food? Mama. His voice was so soft it was almost lost in the cold wind, yet it felt louder than all the laughter and orders around them. His eyes, too big for his thin face, opened halfway and looked straight at the human. There was no anger, no complaint, only need. It was the gaze of someone too young to understand laws or punishment, but old enough to know what hunger meant. The soldier felt the weight of those eyes pressing into his chest like a stone he could not move. His hand twitched near his ration pack again. He could almost feel the smooth shape of the food bar inside. One simple movement and he could give life back to the boy. But around him, the world was a cage. The alien officer's command still rang in his ears. The soldiers stationed nearby shifted restlessly, their hands on weapons, waiting for any excuse to strike. The crowd of colonists stood frozen, their faces filled with a mix of hope and fear. None dared to speak. Everyone was waiting to see what choice the human would make. The officer stepped closer, his shadow stretching over the soldier and the kneeling mother. His voice was sharp, cutting like a blade. Obey your orders. You are not here to feed beggars. Walk away now. He pointed to the gates at the end of the market, as if the soldier's path was already chosen. The crowd held their breath. Even the mother did not look up. She hugged her son tighter, whispering words in her own tongue, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a farewell. The soldier's chest rose and fell heavily. He remembered the strict words drilled into him since training. Never break discipline, never question the chain of command, never show weakness. But his heart was louder now. Every law felt like nothing compared to the boy's thin arm stretched out toward him. He thought of his own little sister back on Earth, how she once cried for food during the famine years. He had sworn then that if he ever had the power to stop such pain, he would. Now that vow returned, burning in his blood. The child coughed weakly, his small body trembling against his mother's arms. The sound was enough to crack the silence again. Murmurs rose in the crowd. The boy will die tonight. Why can't they give him a bite? Even a beast feeds its young. The alien guards snapped their weapons up, silencing the whispers with fear. But the words had already reached the soldier's ears. He knew they were right. He knew turning away would not only kill the boy, but kill something inside himself. The officer's eyes narrowed. Last chance, human. Leave her. His voice carried not only authority, but threat. Punishment would be severe, perhaps death. Yet when the soldier looked down at the child, he did not see fear. He saw trust. Somehow, the boy's weak gaze carried the belief that the man standing above him would not walk away. It was not spoken, but it was clear. You are my last hope. The soldier's fingers curled into a fist. His boots felt rooted to the ground, his breath heavy. He thought of the long nights when he wondered why humans fought so hard to expand into the stars. Was it for power? For wealth? No. It was for moments like this, when one life could mean everything. He reached for his ration pack. The officer's shout exploded like thunder. Do not dare! The guards snapped their rifles up, aiming straight at him. The crowd gasped, but no one moved to stop what was about to happen. The mother raised her head finally, tears in her eyes, but she did not speak. Her silence was louder than words. She expected him to obey, to walk away like every other soldier had done before. The soldier's hand found the pack. He pulled it free and held it tightly. His heart pounded so hard it drowned the noise around him. One step forward, and he was kneeling. He ignored the officer's rage, ignored the weapons pointed at his chest. He looked at the boy. For the first time since he arrived at the colony, the soldier smiled, even if only faintly. He placed the ration bar in the woman's trembling hands. The child's fingers reached out, closing around the food with surprising strength for someone so weak. He bit into it, his small teeth sinking into the soft edge. The first taste lit something in his dull eyes. His body, though still frail, moved faster, as if remembering life. His mother's tears fell freely now. She kissed the soldier's hand, whispering thanks again and again, her voice breaking with every word. The officer's fury was unmatched. He shoved through the crowd, his weapon drawn, his voice shaking with rage. "You have broken law. You shame your kind and ours." He raised his hand to strike the soldier, but something stopped him. It was not fear of punishment. It was the weight of every eye in the market watching. What had been mockery before was now silent respect. The people saw what had been denied them for so long: mercy. The soldier rose slowly, placing himself between the guards and the kneeling mother. He was not tall compared to the aliens, not armored like them, but in that moment he seemed larger than all of them combined. His voice was calm, steady, but carried fire inside. "If compassion is weakness," he said, "then let me be weak." The market did not move. The guards hesitated, unsure if they should strike. The officer's hand shook with fury, but his eyes betrayed doubt. For the first time, the power of fear seemed fragile. The human soldier stood firm, unbroken, while the child ate in his mother's arms, alive for another day. The choice had been made, and nothing would ever be the same again. The soldier's knees pressed against the cold stone as he leaned closer to the woman and her child. Around him, the air was filled with sharp silence, broken only by the sound of the child's small mouth chewing. Every bite was fast, desperate, as if the boy feared the food would vanish from his hands. His little body trembled with each swallow, but his eyes grew brighter with life. The woman's tears fell freely, shining trails across her dirt-covered cheeks. She broke the ration bar in half, pushing more toward her son's lips, before even thinking to taste it herself. Her shaking hands refused to take more than a crumb. All that mattered was that her boy lived one more day. Gasps moved through the market like ripples in water. No one expected the soldier to break the rule. No one thought he would stand against the officer's command. The alien guard stepped forward, weapons raised, their eyes glowing with anger. The officer's voice thundered, cutting through the fragile silence. "Arrest him! Chains for the human and the beggar!" His words dripped with fury. The laughter that had once filled the market was gone now. In its place was fear and something else. Something new, like respect hiding beneath the silence. The soldier stood slowly, his back straight, his body a wall between the mother and the advancing guards. His hand rested near his holster, though he had not yet drawn his weapon. His voice was calm but firm, steady enough to carry across the entire market. "If compassion is a crime, then I accept the punishment." The words struck like a hammer. The guards hesitated, glancing at one another. No one moved. The officer's face twisted with rage. He marched forward, his armor clinking with each step, and grabbed the soldier by the collar. "You dare defy the law? You dare mock command?" His breath was hot, his grip strong. But the human did not flinch. He only met the officer's eyes with quiet defiance. The mother clutched her son tightly, pressing his face against her chest. She expected the next moment to bring blood. But still, she whispered soft thanks, as though even if this soldier died, she would never forget what he had done. Her voice was too low for most to hear, but the soldier caught it. "Thank you." That simple word gave him strength. The officer shoved him hard, forcing him to the ground. Dust rose, stinging the soldier's throat, but he refused to look away. Around them, the crowd grew restless. Some lowered their heads to avoid trouble, but others began to murmur. "He fed the child. He did what none of us dared. He is not afraid." The guards snarled, swinging their rifles toward the crowd to silence them, but the voices would not die. The whispers grew stronger, spreading like fire. The soldier pushed himself back to his feet, brushing dirt from his face. His jaw was tight, but his eyes burned with something unshakable. He looked directly at the officer. "We are soldiers to protect life, not to watch it starve." His words were simple, but they struck deep into the hearts of those listening. The officer roared, drawing his weapon, but before he could strike, the child coughed weakly, breaking the tension once again. The sound was soft, but it echoed in every ear. The officer's weapon wavered, just for a moment. That moment was enough for the crowd to stir again, their eyes shifting from the officer's rage to the soldier's courage. The balance of power began to tremble. The guards advanced in a line, surrounding the soldier and the woman. Spears of steel and glowing rifles pointed at his chest, but he did not step back. He spread his arms slightly, shielding them both. His voice carried once more. If I must fall for a piece of bread, then let me fall. But this boy will not starve while I stand." The officer snarled, giving the order, but hesitation clung to his soldiers. They looked at one another, their grips tightening, yet their feet refused to move. The law told them to act, but something inside told them to stop. None of them had ever seen such defiance for the sake of a starving child. None had ever seen a human challenge the rules so openly. The officer spat, his voice sharp as a blade. "Weakness spreads like disease. If we allow this, we lose control." He turned to the crowd, shouting, "You will watch him be punished." But the crowd did not cheer for him. Their eyes were fixed on the soldier, and in their silence was a spark of rebellion. The mother sobbed quietly, pressing her forehead to the soldier's boot, not from fear, but from gratitude. She knew her life might end that night, but at least someone had stood for her. Her tears stained the dust, and her boy clung to the last piece of ration, chewing slowly, his eyes no longer empty, but alive with hope. The officer raised his weapon, aiming for the soldier's chest. The human did not move. His eyes were steady, his breath calm. In that heartbeat, the market seemed frozen. Every soul waited for the strike, for the punishment to fall. But before the officer could fire, the boy lifted his head and whispered again, his voice weak but filled with meaning. "Papa?" The word spread like lightning. It was not a cry of fear, but of trust, calling the soldier something no one expected. The guards faltered. The crowd gasped. Even the officer's hand shook for a moment. The human closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with a fire no punishment could put out. The standoff stretched, sharp as a blade's edge. The law demanded obedience, but the sight of a starving child saved by a soldier's defiance demanded something greater. The soldier stood tall, unbroken, while the crowd watched, their hearts changing with every breath. Whatever happened next, nothing would erase the image burned into their minds. A human who chose mercy over orders, and a child who called him father in front of the world. The chains were heavy, biting into the soldier's wrists as the guards dragged him through the streets. The alien mother stumbled beside him, her arms bound, clutching her child as best she could. The boy was too weak to cry, his head resting against her shoulder, but his small hands still held the crumbs of food left from the ration bar. Around them, the people watched in silence, their faces pale and fearful. None dared to step forward, but their eyes followed every step. They had seen what happened in the market, and whispers began to travel through the crowd like sparks drifting from a fire. The governor's hall was vast, built from dark stone that swallowed light. Tall banners of the empire hung on the walls, each one marked with symbols of dominance and control. At the far end of the hall, the alien governor sat on his throne, his armor polished, his expression carved from stone. His eyes glowed with cold amusement as the prisoners were thrown before him. The soldier landed hard on the floor, dust rising around him. The mother fell to her knees, still shielding her child as though even in chains she could protect him. The governor's voice was deep and sharp, filling the hall. "So," he said slowly, "a human dares to defy the law for the sake of a beggar and her whelp." His words were met with laughter from the guards lining the hall. The governor leaned forward, his gaze locking on the soldier. "What do you have to say for yourself, human? Do you deny your crime?" The soldier lifted his head, his lip bleeding, but his eyes steady. He did not tremble. "I deny nothing," he said calmly. His voice carried, though his throat was dry. "I gave food to a starving child. If that is a crime, then I am guilty." The hall fell quiet for a moment. The governor tilted his head, studying him as though examining a strange animal. Then he laughed, the sound harsh and cruel. "So proud, so foolish. Did you think your mercy would change anything? The empire is built on strength, not pity, and weakness," he gestured toward the woman, "must be erased." The woman gasped and pulled her child closer. She bowed low, her forehead pressed against the cold stone floor. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking, "punish me if you must, but spare my son. He has done nothing." Her words were met with more laughter, cruel and sharp. The governor raised a hand to silence the room. "Both of you," he said with finality, "are guilty. One for begging, the other for defiance. Your punishment will be exile beyond the walls. There in the wastelands, you will find nothing but ash and death. Let your compassion feed you then, human." His words echoed through the chamber, final and merciless. The mother collapsed, tears streaming down her face. She clung to her son, rocking him as if to keep him alive through sheer will. The child stirred faintly, his small voice rasping, "Mama." The soldier's fists clenched against the chains. His jaw tightened, his breath heavy. Exile meant death, not just for him, but for the mother and her child. He could accept his own fate, but to watch them condemned for simply surviving filled him with a rage he could barely contain. The guards pulled them upright, dragging them toward the doors once more. The mother's cries filled the hall, but the governor's cold smile never faded. The soldier glanced at her, then at the boy. His heart pounded with a vow forming inside him, silent but unbreakable. He leaned closer, his voice low, meant only for her ears. "I won't let them take him," he whispered. The mother looked at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. She wanted to believe, but fear held her heart tight. Outside the hall, the night was heavy with shadows. The moons glowed red, casting the streets in eerie light. The guards marched them toward the gates that led out of the colony, where only wasteland stretched for miles. The crowd followed at a distance, whispering in low voices. Some were afraid. Others, secretly, felt a stirring they had not felt in years. Hope. At the gates, the guards unsealed the heavy iron locks. The sound was final, like a tomb opening. Beyond lay the endless desert of ash, where no food, no water, no shelter could be found. No one who went out ever returned. The mother trembled, holding her son so tightly that he whimpered. She looked at the soldier, her face pale, her lips shaking. "He will die out there," she whispered. The soldier's chains rattled as he straightened. His eyes were sharp now, burning with fire. He looked not at the guards, not at the governor watching from the balcony above, but at the child pressed against his mother's chest. His voice was quiet, but carried strength. "Not while I breathe." The governor chuckled darkly from above. "Such bravery, such foolishness. Take them out. Let the wasteland judge their worth." The guards pushed them forward. The gates creaked open, the sound echoing into the silent night. The soldier stepped into the darkness first, the mother behind him, her child clutching her collar. The people watching whispered louder now. Some turned away, unable to bear the sight. Others stared with wide eyes, as if witnessing something far greater than punishment. The story of what had happened in the market had already begun to spread, and with it, the image of a human who broke the law for mercy. Now that human was walking into death with his head held high, refusing to bow to fear. The gates slammed shut behind them, cutting off the sound of the colony, leaving only the cold wind of the wasteland. Chains still bound their wrists, but in the soldier's heart, something stronger than chains was rising. He knew exile meant they were meant to die. But he also knew one truth. He would not let the boy's plea end in silence. Even if he had to fight the night itself, he would keep his promise. And in that dark moment, with death pressing close, the spark of rebellion was born. The night stretched endless across the wasteland, the air heavy with dust and silence. The soldier's wrists burned from the iron cuffs, but his mind stayed sharp. Each step crunched against the barren ground, the cold wind cutting across his face. Beside him, the alien mother stumbled, her strength fading, yet she clutched her child as if her arms alone could shield him from death. The boy whimpered softly, too weak to speak, his head buried in her shoulder. Every sound echoed in the emptiness, each cough, each shuffle of chains, reminding them that the wasteland was meant to swallow the condemned and leave no trace. The guards had escorted them only so far before turning back. Their laughter still rang in the soldiers' ears. "Let the sand be their grave," one had sneered. The gates of the colony were closed behind them now, sealing off any chance of return. In every direction, the land stretched out dead and lifeless, broken only by jagged rocks and the pale light of the moons. Survival seemed impossible. Yet as the soldier's eyes scanned the shadows, his resolve only grew. He had promised the mother he would not let her child die, and promises made in the face of death could not be broken. Hours passed, and the mother staggered more with every step. At last, she collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. The boy stirred weakly, his small hand reaching up to touch her face. "Mama," he whispered. The soldier dropped to his knees beside them, his chains rattling as he tried to help her rise. Her eyes glistened with tears, but her voice was steady, even in exhaustion. "Leave me," she said. "Take him. Save him. That is enough." The soldier shook his head, his jaw tight. "No. We all go together, or not at all." His voice was harsh but filled with fire. He reached beneath her arm, lifting her to her feet. Though the chains cut into his skin, he half carried her, his other arm steadying the boy against his chest. The child's fragile body pressed close to him, and for a moment, the soldier could feel the faint rhythm of the boy's heart, weak but still fighting. That sound gave him strength. In the distance, faint lights flickered across the horizon, search beams from patrol ships scanning the wasteland. The soldier froze, pulling both mother and child behind the cover of broken rocks. The beams swept past, moving slowly, hunting for signs of life. If they were found, it would not mean rescue, but execution. The soldier's breath was shallow, his eyes fixed on the lights. He whispered, "Stay silent." The mother pressed her hand against her child's mouth, holding him close. The boy's eyes were wide, but he did not cry. Minutes felt like hours until the lights passed, fading into the distance. The soldier exhaled, his chest heavy with relief. He looked at the mother, whose face was pale with fear but still burning with determination. "We move now," he said, voice low but firm. She nodded, no words left to give. They moved deeper into the wasteland, stumbling over rocks and dust, the cold seeping into their bones. The soldier's muscles ached, but he kept going, driven by more than duty now. This was no longer about disobedience or defiance. It was about life itself. He thought of the boy's whisper in the market, calling him Papa. That single word lit a fire in him that could not be put out. He would not fail this child, not while breath remained in his body. As the night stretched on, a new sound reached their ears, howls carried on the wind. The mother stiffened, clutching her son tightly. "Scavengers," she whispered, her voice shaking. From the shadows, glowing eyes appeared, low to the ground and circling closer. The soldier's chains rattled as he shifted, placing himself between the creatures and the family. His hand reached instinctively for a weapon, but none remained. He clenched his fists instead, his stance solid. The first beast lunged, its body lean and sharp, its teeth gleaming in the moonlight. The soldier swung his chained fists with all his strength, the metal striking the creature's skull. It yelped and fell back, blood dripping from its mouth. More came, snarling, circling, hungry for weakness. The mother screamed, shielding her child. But the soldier roared louder, his voice echoing across the wasteland. He struck again and again, each blow fueled not by training, but by pure will. The beasts snarled, but his fury was greater than their hunger. At last, they scattered into the night, their howls fading. Breathing hard, his arms shaking, the soldier turned back to the mother and child. The boy's eyes were wide with fear, but also with something else, trust. The mother stared at the soldier, her lips trembling, words caught in her throat. At last, she whispered, You are not like the others." The soldier said nothing. He only reached down, helping her stand again. The boy nestled into his chest, small fingers clutching his torn uniform. The soldier tightened his hold, and for the first time that night, the child slept, safe against him. They walked on until they found the broken remains of an old transport vehicle, half buried in sand. Its walls offered shelter from the wind, and though it was ruined, it was enough to rest for a while. The soldier settled the boy carefully inside, covering him with his own torn jacket. The mother sat close, tears glistening as she stroked her child's hair. For the first time in days, she saw him sleep without pain. The soldier leaned against the broken wall, his eyes scanning the horizon. He knew the wasteland would not spare them easily. More dangers waited: cold, hunger, pursuit. But as the moons dipped low and the boy's breathing grew steady, the soldier allowed himself one thought. They were still alive, and as long as they lived, there was hope. He looked at the mother, who watched him with quiet eyes. She wanted to speak, but no words came. Instead, she nodded once, a gesture of trust. The soldier nodded back. Chains still bound his wrists, enemies still hunted them, but in that ruined shelter, something unspoken had already been forged. A bond stronger than law, stronger than fear, and strong enough to face whatever came next. The moons hung low when the sound of boots and metal echoed across the wasteland. The soldier was the first to hear it. His eyes snapped open, and he pressed a finger to his lips, warning the mother to stay silent. She clutched her child close, her body trembling as the faint glow of torches appeared on the horizon. The governor had not been satisfied with exile. He had sent troops to make sure none of them returned alive. The soldier rose quietly, chains still binding his wrists, but his body ready for battle. He looked down at the boy, who stirred in his sleep, unaware of the danger closing in. The mother whispered, "We cannot fight them. There are too many." Her voice cracked with fear, but the soldier's eyes burned with determination. He whispered back, "We don't run. We stand." Moments later, the patrol arrived, shadows spilling into the broken shelter. There were 10 of them, armored and armed, their rifles glowing faintly in the dark. At their head was the same officer from the market, his grin wide and cruel. "Did you think exile would save you, human?" he mocked. "No, mercy is not for traitors. Tonight, you all die." The mother pulled her child against her chest, shielding him with her body. The soldier stepped in front of them, his stance steady, his chains clinking with every movement. His voice was calm but sharp, slicing through the night. "If you want them," he said, pointing to the woman and boy, "you go through me first." The officer laughed, raising his weapon. "Easily done." He motioned for his men to advance. The soldiers spread out, surrounding the broken shelter. Dust rose around them as boots scraped the ground, and the boy awoke, his eyes wide with fear. He clung to his mother's arm, whispering, "Papa?" The word made the human's chest tighten, filling him with a strength that no chain could contain. The first guard lunged forward, swinging the butt of his rifle. The soldier ducked low, swinging his chained wrists with brutal force. The iron links cracked against the guard's helmet, sending him stumbling back with a cry. Another rushed in, but the soldier used the broken wall to his advantage, shoving the guard's head into the sharp edge of the wreckage. Blood sprayed the dust, and the mother gasped. She had never seen such fury from one man. The others hesitated, their weapons raised but their feet uncertain. The officer shouted, "Cowards! He's just one human!" His rage pushed them forward, and they attacked together. The fight was chaos. Rifle shots lit the darkness, chains clashed against armor, and the soldier's roars shook the air. Every blow he gave was for the boy who had called him father, every strike for the woman who had begged for scraps. He moved like a storm, his body a weapon even in chains. A rifle butt struck his back, forcing him to his knees. Another guard slashed across his arm, blood soaking into his torn uniform. The mother screamed his name, her voice raw with terror. But he forced himself up again, blood dripping, breath harsh, refusing to fall. He tackled one guard to the ground, wrestling the weapon from his hands, and with a violent strike, the chains around his wrists shattered against the rifle's edge. The sound rang out like freedom. Now unbound, the soldier's strength grew. He seized the rifle and fired, the blast cutting down 2 enemies at once. The mother covered her child's ears as the night filled with gunfire and screams. The soldier fought like a man possessed, each step forward a declaration that he would not let death claim them. Dust turned red beneath his boots, and the cries of the dying echoed across the barren land. At last, only the officer remained, his face twisted with hatred. He aimed his weapon at the mother, forcing the soldier to freeze. "Drop it," the officer hissed, "or she dies." The mother's eyes widened, but she did not move, clutching her son tightly. The soldier's hand tightened around the rifle. His chest heaved, torn between rage and fear. Then, before the officer could fire, the boy whispered again, soft but clear, "Papa, don't stop." Those words struck harder than any weapon. The soldier raised his rifle, ignoring the officer's threat. The two fired at the same time. The blast of energy lit the night. The officer staggered back, a hole burned through his chest, his weapon clattering to the ground. He fell without another word, his body sinking into the dust. The silence that followed was heavy. The soldier stood in the middle of the carnage, chest rising and falling, blood dripping from his wounds. His rifle lowered slowly as he turned to face the mother and child. She was crying, but not from fear. She clutched her son close, whispering words of relief. The boy, his small hands trembling, reached out toward the soldier. The man knelt, pressing his forehead against the child's for a moment. His voice was hoarse but steady. "It's over. You're safe now." The mother looked at him, her eyes wide with something unspoken. Respect, gratitude, and a spark of trust that could never be broken. She had seen him fight not as a soldier bound by orders, but as a man who chose mercy over law, who chose to protect what others called worthless. The wasteland was still deadly, the night still long, but in that moment, she knew they would survive. Not because the world was kind, but because one human had decided it was worth fighting for. The soldier sat beside them, blood on his hands, dust in his lungs, but fire still in his heart. Around them lay the broken bodies of their enemies, proof that even in the darkest night, one act of defiance could light a fire too strong to be extinguished. The boy curled into his chest, finally falling into peaceful sleep, and the mother's tears fell silently as she whispered the same words she had spoken in the market, but now with a voice full of hope. "Thank you." The dawn came slowly, painting the wasteland with faint shades of gold and red. Smoke from the night's battle still hung in the air, rising from the lifeless bodies of the fallen guards. The soldier sat with his back against the broken wall of the shelter, his face pale from blood loss, but his eyes still sharp and alive. The child slept against his chest, breathing softly, his tiny hands clinging to the soldier's torn uniform as if afraid he would disappear. Beside them, the mother sat in silence, watching the horizon with eyes that carried both exhaustion and wonder. For the first time in days, the boy's chest rose and fell with steady rhythm. The mother's hands trembled as she brushed her son's hair, unable to believe he was still alive. Her gaze shifted to the soldier, who sat like a wall of stone, silent and unyielding. His wounds were deep, his clothes soaked in red, but he had not let himself fall. She could not understand it, why a human would risk everything, even his life, for a child not his own. Yet the proof was there in front of her. He had chosen mercy when all others had chosen cruelty. The silence broke when the soldier shifted, wincing at the pain in his side. The mother leaned forward quickly, reaching to help. "You're bleeding," she whispered, her voice soft but urgent. He shook his head, pushing her hand away gently. "It doesn't matter," he said. "What matters is that he eats again today." His voice was rough, but there was no hesitation in his words. The boy stirred, blinking sleep from his eyes. His lips parted, and he whispered one word that carried through the still air. "Papa." The sound froze the mother, her heart caught between shock and sorrow. The soldier looked down at the child, his expression softening. He touched the boy's head gently. "Rest," he said, his voice quieter now. The child smiled faintly before drifting back into sleep. The mother's eyes filled with tears. She pressed her hand against her mouth, holding back a sob. The soldier noticed and turned his gaze toward her. For a long moment, they said nothing. Then she whispered, almost too softly to hear, "He thinks you are his father now." The soldier did not answer immediately. He looked down at the boy's small face, then at the endless wasteland stretching beyond the shelter. At last, he spoke. "Then I will be until he no longer needs me." Those words struck her heart with a weight she could not describe. For years, she had lived under the Empire's cruelty, forced to beg for scraps, mocked, and beaten. No one had ever stood for her. No one had ever said such words. Now this human, this stranger, was willing to carry a burden that was never his. She lowered her head, tears falling silently. For the first time in her life, she felt hope. The peace did not last long. In the distance, horns echoed across the barren land. The governor's forces had discovered the bodies left from the night's fight. They were coming, and this time they would bring more soldiers, more weapons, enough to crush a single man. The soldier stood, his body stiff from pain, but his stance unbroken. He looked at the mother and child. "Stay behind me," he said, "no matter what." The mother shook her head. Her voice was trembling, but her spirit was fierce. "No, we stand with you." She pulled her child closer, pressing her forehead to his, before setting him down gently. The boy was still too weak to walk, but his eyes followed the human with unshaken trust. Dust clouds rose on the horizon as troops marched closer. The sun climbed higher, its light falling on the battlefield ahead. The soldier tightened his grip on the rifle he had taken, every muscle in his body screaming in protest. He knew he might not survive the coming storm, but he also knew one truth: they would not take the boy. When the governor's army arrived, their ranks filled the wasteland with steel and fire. At the front, the governor himself rode in a black transport, his eyes burning with hatred. He raised his hand and his voice thundered. "You should have died in chains, human. Now you will die in front of everyone." The soldier stepped forward, standing tall despite his wounds. He raised his rifle, his voice steady and clear. "You call it death. I call it a fight worth living for." His words carried over the silence, striking every ear like a spark. The soldiers tightened their lines, preparing to advance. The mother gasped, her arms wrapping around her child, but her eyes never left the soldier. In that moment, she understood why her son had called him father. He was not only fighting for them, he was fighting for something greater, something that reached beyond blood or law. He was fighting for the right to live free, to protect those who could not protect themselves. The governor's laughter filled the air, cruel and sharp. He gestured, and his troops surged forward. Dust rose, weapons gleamed, and the wasteland thundered with the sound of war. The soldier braced himself, his eyes locked on the advancing line. His body was broken, his strength fading, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. The first wave crashed against him, but he stood like a wall of fire. Shots rang out, steel clashed, and the cries of battle filled the air. He fought with fury, each strike a promise kept, each breath a defiance of the Empire's chains. The mother watched in awe, clutching her child, tears streaking her face as she whispered the same word her son had spoken. "Papa?" The dawn grew brighter, painting the wasteland in light. And in that rising sun, the image burned into the eyes of all who watched. A human, alone against an army, standing not for himself, but for a starving child and a desperate mother. Whatever the outcome, nothing would erase that moment. It was a flame too strong for the Empire to ever truly put out.